The morning sun beat down on the dusty town square of Cedar Falls as folks gathered around the wooden auction platform. Most came for the livestock sale, but today there was something different, something that made stomachs turn and hearts heavy. The auctioneer's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. "What am I bidding for these two girls?" Strong backs, willing workers, quiet as church mice. 8-year-old Grace clutched her twin sister Mia's hand so tight their knuckles turned white. The crowd of ranchers and farmers studied them like they were livestock, checking their arms for muscle, their faces for signs of trouble. Standing behind the girls was a woman in a faded black dress, her lips curved in a cold smile as she counted coins in her palm. Evelyn Hutchins had dragged these children here before dawn, promising them they were going to find a nice family who needed help. Now she watched the bidding with the satisfaction of someone selling off unwanted furniture. The girls trembled in their thin cotton dresses, bare feet dusty from the long walk to town. Grace whispered something in Mia's ear, probably telling her not to cry, to be brave like she always did. From the back of the crowd, Caleb Morrison pushed forward, his heart pounding for reasons he couldn't understand. At 28, Caleb was known as a fair man and a hard worker, but he kept to himself mostly. Ever since the fire 5 years ago, he'd been different, quieter, more alone. People respected him, but they didn't really know him anymore. Today, something about these girls' faces stirred a memory buried so deep it hurt to touch. The way Grace held her chin up despite her fear. The way Mia twisted her hair around her finger when she was scared. It reminded him of a lullaby, a woman's gentle voice, twin cribs by a window bathed in morning light. But that was impossible. His daughters had died in the fire 5 years ago, hadn't they? Evelyn herself had told him she tried to save them, but couldn't reach their bedroom in time. She'd held him while he cried, whispering that at least Hannah and the girls were together in heaven. Caleb had built his whole grief on that truth. So why did looking at these children feel like looking at ghosts? "Do I hear $50? The auctioneer called out. A rough-looking man in overalls raised his hand. Caleb knew him, Tom Bradley, who worked his hired hands like mules and paid them half what they deserved. The thought of these girls ending up on his farm made Caleb's stomach clench. 75, called another voice. This one belonged to Samuel Creek, whose last 3 workers had quit because of his temper. Caleb watched the girls' faces grow paler with each bid. Grace's jaw set in a way that was achingly familiar, while Mia pressed closer to her sister's side. Without thinking, Caleb's hand shot up. $100. The crowd turned to stare. $100 was more than most folks made in 3 months. Evelyn's eyes widened with greed as she looked him over, not recognizing the man who'd once been her stepson-in-law. 5 years of grief and hard living had changed Caleb's face, made him leaner, harder around the edges. 100 going once, the auctioneer shouted. Tom Bradley spat in the dirt and shook his head. Too rich for his blood. Going twice. Caleb's heart hammered as he stared at the girls. Grace was looking right at him now, her blue eyes wide with something that might have been recognition. Or maybe hope. Mia had stopped twisting her hair and was humming something under her breath, a melody that made Caleb's knees weak with memory. Sold to Caleb Morrison. The auctioneer's gavel came down with a bang that seemed to echo in Caleb's chest. Evelyn hurried over, her smile wide and fake. "Mister, you made a fine choice. These girls are hard workers, no trouble at all. They'll earn their keep, I promise you that." She held out her hand for the money, already counting it in her mind. Caleb pulled out his roll of bills, money he'd been saving to fix his barn roof before winter. His hand shook slightly as he counted out the $100. "What are their names?" he asked, though part of him was afraid of the answer. "Grace and Mia," Evelyn said quickly, snatching the money. "They're good girls, just need a firm hand." She leaned closer, her breath smelling of tobacco. "Don't let them fill your head with wild stories. Children that age, they make things up." The girls climbed into Caleb's wagon without a word, sitting close together on the wooden seat. Grace kept her arm around Mia's shoulders, still protecting her little sister. Caleb noticed that Mia was exactly 3 minutes younger. He could tell by the way Grace watched over her, just like his Grace used to do. As they rode out of town, Caleb tried to make conversation. "You girls hungry? We'll stop and get some food." But they just stared ahead, too scared or too hurt to trust kindness from a stranger. The only sound was the creaking of wagon wheels and Mia's soft humming. Then Grace spoke up, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you going to hurt us, mister?" Caleb's throat tightened. "No, child. Never. Promise." This from Mia, her voice trembling like a bird. "I promise," Caleb said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. As they rolled toward his ranch, Caleb tried to push down the impossible thoughts crowding his mind. These couldn't be his daughters. His girls had died in the fire. Evelyn had told him so herself, had wept with him at their funeral. But as Mia started humming that lullaby again, the one Hannah used to sing, Caleb's hands trembled on the reins. "This road," Mia whispered suddenly, sitting up straighter. "I remember this road." Grace quickly elbowed her sister to be quiet, fear flashing across her face. But it was too late. Caleb had heard, and in that moment, impossible hope began to bloom in his chest like spring after the longest winter. The wagon rolled up the dusty path to Caleb's ranch as the afternoon sun painted everything golden. The two-story farmhouse sat surrounded by rolling pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. It was the same house Caleb had built with his own hands 7 years ago when Hannah was pregnant with the twins. The same house where he planned to raise his family. The same house that had burned and been rebuilt but never felt like home again. Grace gasped when she saw it. "It's the same house," she whispered, then quickly covered her mouth with her hand, realizing she'd spoken out loud. Mia stared at the building with wide eyes, her little body trembling with something that looked like recognition. Caleb's heart skipped a beat. How could Grace know what the house looked like? He'd rebuilt it exactly as it was before the fire, but these girls had supposedly never been here. Unless they had lived here once. Unless they were his daughters, somehow alive after all these years. "You girls ever been to a ranch before?" Caleb asked carefully, watching their faces. Grace shook her head quickly, but Mia was already climbing down from the wagon. She ran straight toward the front door, then stopped and looked around with confusion. "Where's the swing?" she asked innocently. "There used to be a swing on that big tree." Caleb's breath caught in his throat. There had been a swing on that oak tree. He'd built it himself when the girls were 6, but it had burned in the fire. He'd never put up another one because the memory was too painful. How could this child know about it? "Mia, shush." Grace hissed, grabbing her sister's arm. "Don't say things like that." But Caleb knelt down to Mia's level, his voice gentle. "What else do you remember about this place?" Mia looked at Grace nervously, then whispered. "There was a garden. Mama Hannah grew flowers, yellow ones and red ones. And we had chickens. I named mine Buttercup." Grace's face went white. She pulled Mia close and whispered fiercely in her ear, "Stop talking. You'll get us in trouble." Caleb stood slowly, his mind reeling. Hannah had grown marigolds and roses in that exact spot. They'd had chickens, and as Mia had indeed named one Buttercup. These details weren't things a stranger would know. They weren't things someone could have told these girls. They were memories, real memories. "Let's get you girls inside," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. "You must be hungry." He led them into the house, watching as their eyes darted around the familiar rooms. The living room with its stone fireplace. The kitchen with the blue curtains Hannah had sewn. Everything was exactly as it had been, except for the family that used to fill it with laughter. Caleb made them sandwiches with thick slices of bread and fresh butter. The girls ate like they hadn't seen food in days, which broke Caleb's heart. As they ate, he studied their faces. Grace had Hannah's stubborn chin and his own dark hair. Mia had Hannah's gentle blue eyes and delicate features. They looked exactly like his daughters would have looked at 8 years old. "Where have you girls been living?" Caleb asked softly. Grace answered with her mouth full. Lots of places. Evelyn sells us to families who need workers. We clean houses and help with chores. Some people are nice, Mia added, but some are mean. They don't give us enough food, and they make us sleep in barns. Caleb's hands clenched into fists. The thought of his daughters, if these were his daughters, being treated like servants, going hungry, sleeping in cold barns, made him want to find Evelyn and shake her until she told him the truth. "What happened to your parents?" he asked, though his heart pounded as he waited for the answer. "Evelyn says our papa died in a fire," Grace said quietly. "She says nobody wanted us after that, so she had to take care of us. But we remember Papa," Mia said suddenly. "He was tall like you, and he used to carry us on his shoulders. And Mama Hannah, she smelled like flowers, and she sang us songs." Grace kicked Mia under the table. "Stop it. Evelyn says we're not supposed to talk about before." Caleb's chest felt tight. These girls remembered him. They remembered Hannah. But how is that possible if they'd died in the fire? After dinner, Caleb showed them to the guest room where they'd sleep. It was right next to what used to be the twins' bedroom, though he'd turned that into a storage room after the fire. He couldn't bear to keep it as it was. "The bathroom's down the hall," he told them. "There are clean clothes in the dresser and extra blankets in a closet. If you need anything, just holler." As he started to leave, Mia called out softly, "Mr. Caleb?" He turned around. "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for being kind to us. Most people aren't." Caleb's throat felt thick. "You girls deserve kindness. All children do." Later that night, Caleb sat on his front porch with a cup of coffee, staring up at the stars. His mind was spinning with possibilities, each one more incredible than the last. Could Evelyn have lied about the girls dying? Could she have somehow saved them from the fire but told them they were dead? But why would she do such a thing? He was about to head inside when he heard something that made his blood run cold. Singing. A soft, sweet voice drifting from the guest room window. It was Mia, singing the lullaby Hannah used to sing to their daughters every night. "Hush now, my baby, the moon's riding high, silver and gold across the dark sky. Close your sweet eyes and dream through the night. Mama will keep you safe till daylight." Caleb's hand shook as he set down his coffee cup. Hannah had made up that lullaby. She'd never sung it to anyone but Grace and Mia. There was no way these girls could know it unless they were his daughters. He crept closer to the house and heard Grace's voice join in, harmonizing the way his daughters used to do. Then he heard something that nearly dropped him to his knees. "I miss Mama Hannah," Mia whispered. "Me too," Grace replied. "Do you think Papa Caleb is really our papa?" "He feels like Papa," Mia said. "He has the same kind eyes." Caleb pressed his back against the house wall, tears streaming down his face. His daughters were alive. Somehow, impossibly, miraculously alive. Evelyn had lied to him. She'd stolen his children and let him believe they were dead for 5 long years. But why? And how was he going to prove it? Caleb barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Mia's sweet voice singing Hannah's lullaby. By dawn, he'd made up his mind. He needed answers, and he needed them today. After fixing the girls a breakfast of eggs and bacon, he loaded them into the wagon for another trip to town. "Where are we going?" Grace asked, her hand protectively holding Mia's as they sat beside him. "Town Hall," Caleb said simply. "I need to look at some old records. You girls can wait outside. Maybe get some candy at Peterson's store." The Cedar Falls Town Hall was a small brick building that housed the mayor's office, the sheriff, and all the official records. Caleb had been here 5 years ago to file Hannah's and the girls' death certificates. Now he was back to find out if those papers were telling the truth. Mrs. Henderson, the town clerk, looked up from her desk with surprise. "Caleb Morrison, haven't seen you in ages. What brings you here?" "Need to look at some death certificates from 5 years back," Caleb said, trying to keep his voice steady. "The fire in my place." Mrs. Henderson's face softened with sympathy. "Oh, honey, why would you want to revisit that sadness? Those records are all filed away proper. Just need to see them, ma'am. It's important." She disappeared into the back room, and returned with a dusty folder. Caleb's hands trembled as he opened it. Hannah's death certificate looked official enough, signed by Dr. Miller and witnessed by 2 townspeople. But when he looked at the certificates for Grace and Mia Morrison, something felt wrong. The handwriting looked different, shakier, and there was a detail that made his blood run cold. The certificates listed the girls as being found in their bedroom, but Caleb remembered clearly that their bedroom was at the back of the house. The fire had started in the kitchen and spread toward the front. The back bedrooms had been the last to burn. If the girls had died in their beds, their bodies should have been recoverable. So why did Evelyn tell him they were burned beyond recognition? Mrs. Henderson, Caleb said carefully, who identified the bodies. She consulted her records. Says here Dr. Miller confirmed the deaths, and Evelyn Hutchins identified the remains as family members. Caleb's jaw tightened. Evelyn had identified the bodies, but what if there had been no bodies to identify? What if she'd lied to cover up the fact that she'd rescued the girls and then stolen them? Mind if I talk to Dr. Miller about this? Mrs. Henderson frowned. Caleb, dear, what's this all about? You seem mighty stirred up. Caleb glanced out the window where Grace and Mia were looking at penny candy through the store window, just trying to put some old questions to rest. Dr. Miller's office was 3 blocks away. Caleb found the old doctor organizing medicine bottles, his gray hair thin and his hands shaky with age. When Caleb asked about the fire, Dr. Miller's face went pale. Why are you asking about that after all these years? He stammered. Just need to understand what happened that night. You signed death certificates for my daughters. Dr. Miller set down the bottle he was holding. His hands were trembling worse now. Caleb, some things are better left buried. What does that mean? The old doctor looked toward the door nervously. I did what I thought was best at the time. Evelyn said the children had suffered enough, that it was kinder to let them be at peace. Caleb stepped closer. What children, Doc? What are you talking about? Dr. Miller swallowed hard. I never actually saw any bodies, Caleb. Evelyn came to me the day after the fire, crying and carrying on. She said the girls were so badly burned that identifying them would just cause more pain. She begged me to sign the certificates so you could have some closure. The room spun around Caleb. You signed death certificates without seeing bodies? She said it was a mercy. She said you were suffering enough without having to see what the fire had done to them. Dr. Miller's voice cracked. I was trying to spare you more pain. Caleb's vision blurred with rage. Where are they, Doc? Where are my daughters? I don't know. Evelyn said she'd take care of the burial arrangements. Private ceremony, she said. I thought I was helping. Caleb stormed out of the doctor's office, his mind reeling. The girls waiting by the candy store were definitely his daughters. Evelyn had lied to everyone, including Dr. Miller. But why? What could she possibly gain by stealing his children and letting him believe they were dead? As he walked back toward the girls, Caleb's mind raced through memories of Evelyn. She'd been Hannah's stepsister, always jealous of Hannah's happiness. She'd never married, never had children of her own. After Hannah's death, she'd been strangely eager to help Caleb settle Hannah's affairs. She'd insisted on handling the legal paperwork, the insurance claims, everything. The insurance. Caleb stopped dead in his tracks. Hannah had a life insurance policy that covered the children too. If the girls were officially dead, Evelyn would have been the beneficiary as next of kin. She collected money for children who were actually alive. Papa Caleb. Mia came running toward him, a peppermint stick in her hand. Look what the nice store man gave us. Grace followed more slowly, her eyes studying Caleb's face. Are you okay, mister? You look upset. Caleb knelt down and pulled both girls into a hug. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just fine. But as they climbed back into the wagon, Caleb's mind was already planning his next move. He needed more evidence. He needed proof that would hold up when Evelyn inevitably came looking for the girls. Because now he was certain she would come. She'd sold Grace and Mia at that auction, expecting them to disappear into another family's farm, just like they had for 5 years. When she realized Caleb had bought them, She'd put two and two together. As they rode back to the ranch, Grace spoke up quietly. "That mean lady's coming back, isn't she?" Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. "What makes you say that?" "She always comes back," Mia said sadly. "Whenever we start to feel safe somewhere, Evelyn shows up and takes us away." Grace nodded. "She says we belong to her, that nobody else wants broken children like us." Caleb's heart broke and his anger flared at the same time. "You girls aren't broken, and you don't belong to her. But what if she has papers that say we do?" Grace asked with the wisdom of a child who'd been disappointed too many times. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Sometimes papers lie, Grace. But love doesn't. And I promise you, no matter what papers Evelyn has, I won't let her take you away from me again." As they pulled up to the ranch, Caleb saw a dust cloud on the horizon. Someone was coming, riding hard toward their property. His blood ran cold when he recognized the horse and rider. Evelyn was coming back. Evelyn Hutchins rode up to Caleb's ranch like she owned the place, her black dress billowing behind her and her face set in hard lines. She dismounted her horse with practiced ease and marched straight toward the porch where Caleb stood protectively in front of Grace and Mia. The girls had gone pale the moment they saw her coming, and now they cowered behind Caleb's legs like frightened rabbits. Well, Evelyn said with a cold smile. "Caleb Morrison, I should have known you'd be trouble." She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a rolled-up paper tied with string. "I've come for my property." "These girls aren't property," Caleb said evenly, though his heart was hammering. "They're children." Evelyn laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. "Children who belong to me, legal and proper." She unrolled the paper and held it up. "Signed and witnessed guardianship papers. Grace and Mia Hutchins are my legal wards, bound to me until they reach 18 years of age." Caleb glanced at the papers. They looked official enough, with fancy letterhead and official seals. But he noticed something important. The girls were listed as Hutchins, not Morrison. Evelyn was still maintaining her lie about their identity. "Those papers are based on fraud," Caleb said firmly. "These girls aren't who you claim they are." Evelyn's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Is that so? And just who do you think they are, Mr. Morrison?" Caleb looked down at Grace and Mia, both trembling but trying to be brave. Grace reached up and took his hand, squeezing it tight. In that moment, Caleb made his choice. Truth or consequences, he was done living with lies. "They're my daughters," he said quietly. "Grace and Mia Morrison. The children you told me died in the fire 5 years ago." Evelyn's face went white, then red with rage. "That's impossible. Those children died. I saw their bodies myself." "No, you didn't," Caleb said, stepping forward. "Because there were no bodies. You rescued my daughters from the fire, then lied to everyone, including Dr. Miller, about their deaths. You've been selling them as workers for 5 years while collecting insurance money on their supposed deaths. You can't prove any of that." Evelyn snarled, but her voice had a desperate edge now. "Actually, I can." Caleb pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. "Dr. Miller signed an affidavit this afternoon admitting he never saw any bodies. He falsified those death certificates based on your lies." Evelyn's composure cracked. "That old fool. He was supposed to take that secret to his grave." Grace gasped. Even at 8 years old, she understood what Evelyn had just admitted. Mia started crying softly, finally understanding that the woman who'd controlled their lives had been lying all along. "Why?" Caleb asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why would you do this to innocent children?" "To me." Evelyn's face twisted with years of buried resentment. "Because Hannah never deserved the life she had. She never deserved you, or this ranch, or those children. She was always the pretty one, the lucky one, while I got nothing." Her voice rose to a shriek. "I should have been the one to marry you. I should have been the one with the beautiful house and the perfect family." "So you decided to destroy mine," Caleb said quietly. "I decided to take what should have been mine." Evelyn straightened her dress, trying to regain her composure. The insurance money, the property rights Hannah left behind, all of it should have come to me as her only family. Caleb understood now. With Hannah dead and the children officially dead too, Evelyn had been the sole heir to Hannah's modest inheritance. She'd collected insurance money, sold family belongings, and probably planned to claim part of the ranch eventually. The girls had been her secret source of income, sold and resold to different families over the years. "Well, it's over now," Caleb said firmly. "I'm taking my daughters to Sheriff Patterson right now, and you're going to jail for fraud, kidnapping, and child abuse." Evelyn's eyes flashed dangerously. "I don't think so." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small Derringer pistol. Grace screamed, and Mia buried her face in Caleb's leg. "Those girls are coming with me right now, and you're not going to stop me." Caleb raised his hands slowly, his mind racing. The gun was small but deadly at close range. Evelyn's hand was shaking with rage and desperation. Not a good combination with a loaded weapon. "Evelyn, think about what you're doing," Caleb said calmly. "Shooting me won't solve anything. There are witnesses now. Dr. Miller, Mrs. Henderson at the town hall. Probably half the town has heard the story by now. Then I'll take the girls and disappear." Evelyn said wildly, "There's places out west where nobody asks questions. I can sell them to mining camps, railroad crews, anyone who needs workers." The casual way she talked about selling children made Caleb's blood boil, but he forced himself to stay calm. Grace was trembling against his side, but she wasn't crying. His brave little girl was trying to be strong, even with a gun pointed at her father. "You don't want to do this, Evelyn," Caleb said softly. "These are innocent children. They've been through enough. They're my meal ticket." Evelyn snapped. "Do you have any idea how much money I've made selling them over the years? Strong, healthy girls who can work from dawn to dusk without complaining. They're worth more than your precious ranch." That was the final straw. Caleb had heard enough. In one swift motion, he pushed Grace and Mia toward the porch steps and lunged at Evelyn. The gun went off with a sharp crack, but Caleb was already on her, wrestling the weapon away. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, Evelyn clawing and screaming like a wild animal. "Run, girls," Caleb shouted as he struggled to pin Evelyn down. "Get to the barn and hide." But Grace and Mia didn't run. Instead, Grace picked up a bucket of water from the porch and threw it over Evelyn's head, while Mia grabbed a rope from Caleb's saddlebag. Working together like they'd planned it, the girls helped Caleb tie up the woman who had terrorized them for 5 long years. As Evelyn lay bound and sputtering on the ground, Caleb looked at his daughters with amazement and pride. "You girls okay?" Grace straightened her shoulders and nodded. "We're Morrison girls, Papa. We don't run from fights." Mia wiped her nose on her sleeve and grinned. "Besides, somebody had to help you. You were losing." Caleb laughed despite everything, pulling both girls into a fierce hug. They were safe. Evelyn was captured, and tomorrow he would ride to town and make sure the whole world knew that Grace and Mia Morrison were alive, safe, and finally home where they belonged. The next morning, half of Cedar Falls gathered in the town square to witness something nobody had expected to see. Word had spread like wildfire through the small community. Kayla Morrison's daughters were alive, and Evelyn Hutchins was about to face justice for 5 years of lies and cruelty. Sheriff Patterson stood on the courthouse steps, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the crowd. Beside him, Caleb held Grace and Mia's hands tightly. The girls wore clean dresses that Martha Henderson from the general store had donated, their hair brushed and braided, looking like the proper young ladies they should have been all along instead of the frightened workers Evelyn had made them into. Evelyn sat in a wooden chair with her hands tied behind her back, 2 deputies flanking her. Her black dress was torn and dirty from yesterday's struggle, and her hair hung loose around her face like a wild woman's. She glared at the crowd with pure hatred, especially at Caleb and the girls. "Folks," Sheriff Patterson called out, his voice carrying across the square. "We're here today because serious accusations have been made. Caleb Morrison claims these two girls are his daughters Grace and Mia, who were supposed to have died in the fire 5 years back. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some people looked skeptical, others curious. Mrs. Bentley from the church shook her head sadly. "Poor Caleb," she whispered to her neighbor. "Grief can make a man see things that aren't there." But Martha Henderson stepped forward, studying the girls' faces carefully. She had known Hannah Morrison well, had helped deliver the twins 8 years ago. "Sheriff," she said loudly, "I birthed these babies with my own hands. That's Grace and Mia Morrison, sure as I'm standing here." Dr. Miller shuffled forward, his face pale but determined. In his shaky hands, he held a written statement. "Sheriff, I need to confess something. I signed death certificates for these children 5 years ago, but I never actually saw any bodies." The crowd fell silent. This was bigger than they'd expected. "Go on, Doc," Sheriff Patterson urged. Dr. Miller's voice trembled as he read from his paper. "Evelyn Hutchins came to me the day after the fire. She was crying and carrying on, saying the children were burned beyond recognition and that it would be kinder to spare Caleb the sight of them. She begged me to sign the death certificates so he could have closure and move on with his life." "That's not true," Evelyn shouted, struggling against her bonds. "Those certificates are legal and proper." "Then explain this," Caleb said, pulling out another document. "Insurance records show you collected $500 in death benefits for Grace and Mia, money that was supposed to help me bury my children." Evelyn's face went white, then red with rage. "I deserve that money. I was Hannah's only family. I took care of everything while you wallowed in your grief." "You took care of everything, all right," Caleb said bitterly, "including stealing my daughters and selling them like cattle." Grace stepped forward, her small voice clear and strong. "She's lying about everything. We remember the fire. We remember Evelyn waking us up and taking us out the back door." Mia nodded, her stutter gone now that she felt safe. "She told us Papa was dead and that nobody would ever want us because we were cursed children from a burned house." The crowd gasped. Several women pressed handkerchiefs to their eyes at the thought of what these innocent children had endured. "For 5 years," Grace continued, her chin raised defiantly, "she sold us to different families. Some were nice, but most treated us like slaves. We slept in barns, ate scraps, and worked from sunrise to sunset. And every time we started to feel safe somewhere," Mia added, tears in her eyes, "Evelyn would come back and sell us to someone else. She said nobody could ever love broken children like us." Evelyn was breathing hard now, her composure completely gone. "They're lying. Children always lie to get attention." "Then explain how they know things only my daughters would know," Caleb challenged. He knelt beside Mia and gently rolled up her sleeve, revealing a small heart-shaped birthmark on her shoulder. "Mia was born with this mark. I used to kiss it every night when I tucked her in." He turned to Grace. "And Grace has a scar on her palm from when she tried to help me fix the fence when she was 3 years old." Grace held up her hand, showing the thin white line across her palm. The crowd was convinced now. These were definitely Caleb Morrison's daughters. But Evelyn wasn't finished fighting. "So what if there's children?" she snarled. "I saved them from that fire. I kept them alive when he couldn't. I should be rewarded, not punished." "You kept them alive so you could profit from them," Sheriff Patterson said coldly. "That's called slavery, Evelyn, and it's against the law. I gave them food and shelter. You sold them to strangers." Caleb's voice thundered across the square. "You let me believe my children were dead while you made money off their labor. You destroyed 5 years of our lives." Evelyn's mask finally slipped completely. Years of resentment poured out in a venomous stream. "Hannah never deserved you. She was nothing special, just a pretty face who got lucky. I was smarter, stronger, more capable, but she got everything: the husband, the house, the children, the perfect life." The crowd recoiled at the hatred in her voice. "I should have been the one you married," Evelyn screamed. "I should have been the one with those children." When the fire started, I saw my chance to take what should have been mine. So you stole my daughters and let me suffer, Caleb said quietly. I gave you a clean break. Evelyn shot back. You could have moved on, found another wife, started over. Instead, you moped around that ranch for 5 years, feeling sorry for yourself. Sheriff Patterson had heard enough. Evelyn Hutchins, you're under arrest for fraud, kidnapping, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. As the deputies lifted Evelyn from her chair, she looked back at Grace and Mia with pure malice. You little brats ruined everything. I should have left you in that fire. Grace stepped protectively in front of Mia, her young face fierce with courage. You didn't ruin us, Evelyn. We survived you. And now we're home where we belong. The crowd erupted in cheers as Evelyn was led away to jail. Caleb knelt and pulled both girls into his arms, tears streaming down his face. My babies, he whispered. My precious girls. Papa's so sorry it took so long to find you. We knew you'd come for us eventually, Grace said softly. We never stopped believing. As the crowd began to disperse, folks came up to congratulate Caleb and welcome the girls home properly. Martha Henderson brought cookies. The preacher offered to hold a special Thanksgiving service, and even the skeptical Mrs. Bentley apologized for doubting. Grace and Mia Morrison were officially home at last. 6 months later, the Morrison Ranch looked like a completely different place. The house that had stood empty and silent for 5 years now rang with children's laughter. Grace and Mia had transformed from frightened, hollow-eyed workers into happy, healthy 8-year-olds who ran through the fields chasing butterflies and climbed trees like proper ranch children should. Caleb stood on his front porch, coffee cup in hand, watching his daughters help Martha Henderson hang laundry on the line. Martha had become like a grandmother to the girls, teaching them things their mother would have taught them: how to bake bread, how to sew on buttons, how to braid each other's hair. The old woman had moved into the spare room to help Caleb learn how to be a father again after 5 years of believing his children were dead. Papa Caleb. Mia came running across the yard, her blonde braids bouncing. She wasn't the timid, stuttering child she'd been at the auction. Now she was bold and curious, always asking questions and exploring everything around her. Look what I found. She held up a robin's egg, blue as her eyes. Be careful with that, sweetheart, Caleb said, kneeling to examine the delicate shell. That might have a baby bird inside. Grace walked over more slowly, carrying a basket of eggs from the chicken coop. At 8 years old, she was still the protective big sister, but now she was also allowed to be a child herself. She no longer carried the weight of keeping herself and Mia safe from cruel adults. That was Caleb's job now, and he took it seriously. We should put it back where you found it, Grace told her sister wisely. The mama bird will be worried. Caleb smiled at the exchange. Grace had grown into a thoughtful, caring child who reminded him so much of Hannah it sometimes took his breath away. She had her mother's gentle heart and practical mind, always thinking of others first. The legal aftermath of Evelyn's crimes had been swift and decisive. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison for fraud, kidnapping, and child endangerment. The insurance company not only returned the fraudulent death benefits, but paid additional compensation for the suffering Caleb and the girls had endured. Dr. Miller, racked with guilt, had testified on their behalf and helped ensure Evelyn would never hurt another child. The town of Cedar Falls had embraced the Morrison family's reunion with open arms. The same people who had once whispered about Caleb's strange behavior now understood that he'd been grieving children who were actually alive and suffering. Church ladies brought casseroles and clothing. Ranchers offered to help with cattle roundups. The schoolteacher, Miss Peterson, worked extra hours to help Grace and Mia catch up on 5 years of missed education. Both girls were bright and eager to learn. Grace excelled at reading and arithmetic, while Mia showed a remarkable talent for art, drawing pictures of ranch life that covered every wall of the house. Caleb had enrolled them in the town school, where they quickly made friends with other children their age. For the first time in their lives, they could just be kids. The nightmares had faded gradually. In the beginning, both girls would wake up screaming, thinking Evelyn had come back for them. But as weeks turned to months, and Kayla was there every single time to comfort them, they began to truly believe they were safe. Mia's stutter disappeared completely, and Grace's protective walls came down piece by piece. Caleb had changed too. The hollow, grief-stricken man who had lived like a ghost for 5 years was gone. In his place was a devoted father who threw himself into every aspect of his daughters' lives. He learned to braid hair and tie ribbons. He attended school plays and parent meetings. He read bedtime stories every night and sang the same lullabies Hannah used to sing. One evening, as autumn painted the prairie in shades of gold and red, Caleb found Grace sitting on Hannah's grave with a handful of wildflowers. The small headstone read, "Hannah Elizabeth Morrison, beloved wife and mother," and beside it were two smaller stones that had once marked the supposed graves of Grace and Mia. "Mama," Grace was saying softly to the headstone, "we're home now. Papa Caleb takes real good care of us. He makes pancakes every Sunday morning, and he's teaching us to ride horses. Mia drew you a picture. I'll bring it next time." Caleb's throat tightened with emotion. He approached quietly and sat beside his daughter on the grass. "Do you think Mama Hannah knows we're okay now?" Grace asked, leaning against his side. "I think she's been watching over you this whole time," Caleb said gently. "I think she helped me find you at that auction, even though I didn't realize it then." Grace nodded seriously. "Mia says she dreams about Mama sometimes. Happy dreams where Mama is singing and hugging us. Those are good dreams to have." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the prairie. Then Grace asked the question Caleb had been expecting. "Papa, are you going to get married again someday?" Caleb considered his answer carefully. "I don't know, sweetheart. Right now, I'm just focused on being the best papa I can be to you and Mia. Would it bother you if I did remarry someday?" Grace thought about it seriously. "I think Mama Hannah would want you to be happy. And maybe Mia and I would like having a new mama, as long as she was nice to us. Anyone who wanted to be part of this family would have to love you girls as much as I do," Caleb promised. "That's not negotiable." As they walked back to the house, Caleb saw Mia through the kitchen window, helping Martha stir something on the stove. Her face was bright with concentration and joy, so different from the terrified child he'd bought at auction just 6 months ago. That night, after the girls were tucked into their beds, real beds, in their own room that Caleb had lovingly rebuilt, he sat at his kitchen table writing in a journal Martha had given him. "Today marks 6 months since Grace and Mia came home," he wrote. "They're not the same children who were stolen from me 5 years ago, and I'm not the same man who lost them. We're all different now, scarred but stronger, hurt but healing. Evelyn took 5 years from us, but she couldn't take our love for each other. That survived everything." A year later, Caleb commissioned a professional photographer to take a family portrait. In the picture, he stands behind Grace and Mia, his hands on her shoulders, all three of them smiling genuinely at the camera. Grace wears a blue dress that brings out her eyes, and Mia holds the wooden horse Caleb carved for her birthday. They look like what they are, a real family, complete and whole. The portrait sits on the mantel now, replacing the burned remnants of their old life. Sometimes Caleb catches the girls looking at it with wonder, as if they still can't quite believe their happy ending is real. On quiet evenings, when the chores are done and the girls are playing contentedly, Caleb sits on his porch and watches the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The land stretches endlessly before him, full of possibility and promise. His daughters are safe, healthy, and loved. They attend school, have friends, and dream about their futures instead of fearing their past. Grace wants to be a teacher someday, so she can help other children learn. Mia talks about becoming an artist and painting pictures that make people happy. Caleb encourages both dreams, knowing that his daughters can become anything they set their minds to. The Morrison family is finally complete again. They've weathered the worst storm imaginable and come through stronger than ever. And as Caleb watches Grace and Mia chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, their laughter echoing across the prairie, he knows that Hannah would be proud of the family they've rebuilt from the ashes of tragedy. They are home, they are whole, and they are together as they were always meant to be.